Yes, I'm Eugenia Constantino, and I teach Introduction to Biblical Studies and Early Christianity here at the University of San Diego.
And you belong to what church?
I'm Greek Orthodox Christian.
So what's the name of your church here? Are you in San Diego, your church?
I'm actually married to a Greek Orthodox priest who is running a little mission parish in San Luis Obispo. St. Andrew the Apostle, Greek Orthodox mission. It's a beautiful congregation, and he's been up there for a couple of years, but it's quite unusual for me not to be living in the same parish where my husband is located as a priest. But so I'm usually there on weekends, or perhaps I will visit St. Spiridon Greek Orthodox Church here in town in San Diego, or I may visit one of the other Orthodox churches here in town. So I do float around a bit.
I want to ask you, are you open to Christian unity, the one they're doing here in the Orientale Lumen?
Yes, of course. I think that most of the Orthodox Christians would be very happy to see more Christian unity. It's something that we're obligated to seek.
What is the stumbling block for Christian unity?
Yeah. The stumbling block for Christian unity are really doctrinal divisions that have occurred since the Great Schism between the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, and then all of the developments which have happened in the West since that time. I think this is really the greatest problem. And between us and the Roman Catholics, it is, of course, the issues concerning the Pope, papal primacy as it is understood and practiced in Rome. We don't have an objection to acknowledging the primacy of the Bishop of Rome, because this was the ancient tradition, but it was always a primacy of honor, not a direct jurisdiction over the affairs of the other churches. So we would have no difficulty acknowledging the primacy of the Pope of Rome, but he must allow the East to continue, as it always has, to govern itself, and they would also have to acknowledge that some of the doctrines which have been added by the Catholic Church in the past 1,000 years, they would have to be rethought. I think that's the greatest problem. We are obviously the closest to the Catholic Church, but unfortunately those doctrinal innovations, as we see them by the Catholic Church, are creating the current problem, and the papal infallibility, of course.
You know, I know it is easier for Orthodox and Catholic to unite first, because the Anglicans and the Lutherans and the rest, they don't have the Eucharistic meaning the way we know the Eucharist is the true presence. How do you see them uniting? I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult because of the presence.
How do I see the Western churches uniting? I think that is a problem. Although I have Lutheran colleague here at the University of San Diego, and they do believe in the real presence. So I do think in some Protestant and Anglican circles, they're not in complete agreement themselves on those issues, because they do acknowledge some aspect of, perhaps not in the way that we might articulate it. So I'm not sure about how unity would be achieved in the West among the various churches. But I would say that in many respects, because we have that strong sacramentality between the Orthodox and the Catholic, we do recognize each other as very close. And I think this is what makes our separation so difficult to accept, because we have so much in common, and we have maintained those apostolic traditions in a way that unfortunately the other Western churches, the Protestant churches in particular, have lost.
I want to ask you first, what is the key, not to Christian unity now, I want to ask you for the unification of the feast day of Easter. What do you think? Because this could come before the Christian unity.
Yes. I think that's a possibility to agree on a date for Easter. Actually, I'm sure that's under discussion right now.
What's the key, though?
The key, I think, may be actually in coming up with a formula that obviously that both churches, the Orthodox and the Catholic, can agree upon. Definitely there is a difference in the interpretation of the Canon of Nicaea in that regard, but it has to do also with the calculation of the date based on certain astronomical tables. You know,
I know the Orthodox, they say, have the correct dates. I've been hearing this because you
the
come
Orthodox,
after
yes,
Passover.
that's right. This is why the Orthodox are quite insistent. When you have Easter, for example, as often happens in the Catholic Church, at the end of March, and then Passover doesn't happen until mid-April or sometimes the end of April, in which we would follow the Passover, this to us is a sign that there's a disconnection between the understanding of Pascha as an event related to the Passover, and a reinterpretation, or actually Jewish Passover really is a foretaste of the Passover that we experience with Christ. Yes. That Christ is our new Pascha, we say. So it's very important to keep it very closely tied to the Jewish timing. And perhaps, it has been suggested to me by an Orthodox friend and theologian, he thinks that it has to do with perhaps rethinking the tables, because it has to do with the moons and the phases of the moon, etc. He thinks that there might be a way around it by considering how we arrive at the date according to astronomical calculations. Yes. But I don't have any specifics on that.
So what is the key to Christian unity?
I think the key is that we must continue to talk to each other. Some of the ecumenical dialogues, I know that there are some Orthodox and probably some Catholics too who are very uncomfortable with this because they're afraid that ecumenical dialogue will cause us to give away or to give up, or elements of our faith, or perhaps compromise our respective faiths. But since the ecumenical dialogue has been going rather strongly now for about 40 years, I have not seen that as an Orthodox Christian. I haven't seen Orthodox Christians compromising their faith at these dialogues. I think that what they're doing is leading to greater understanding. It is important that we recognize each other as fellow Christians and that we facilitate the lines of communication, because if we remain only at odds with each other, there will never be unity. And basically the key to unity is to continue to talk, to pray, and to have patience.
And to love.
That's absolutely.
Thank you
indeed.
very much.
Thank you very much, and all the best to you and all of your viewers.
Thank you.